bit here and show you a bit of what's going on at Works. And we've got this installation right now, and the whoa, you guys went way up over there. Okay, I'm gonna bring the human beings down over here, because like you guys went up to the ceiling over there on my other monitor. Sorry about that. But I just want to see some human beings. I miss human beings that I don't always like know, and just great to see like a little grid of folks, you know. Anyways, we've had since the murder of George Floyd, at Works, we launched an exhibition called For Mr. Floyd, Ms. Taylor, and of course, Breonna Taylor. And at Works, we really don't believe in corporate statements and that sort of thing about stuff that's going on in society. That there was a plethora of those after the murder of George Floyd, and about the Black Lives Matter movement. We really prefer, like, you know, action and inviting the community, and so that's what we did with an exhibition we have online that's called For Mr. Floyd, Ms. Taylor, and I'll put that up a bit in the chat when we get back to the session here, that you can link to, or you can just go to workssj.org and click at the top under online exhibitions and see about 70 some artists who contributed. So this last Friday and this coming Friday, we did a physical installation at Works where we would be tonight, and that's going on here in this video that I assume that you're seeing, because my green square says that you're seeing it. And this is a little projection of monitors and several projections and several monitors of the exhibition, and just all sorts of artists, everyone from students at San Jose State to people who are well established in the art community, contributing to this exhibition. And we just decided to do a physical thing of it for First Friday, where we had a number of visitors who came by during the evening. Not a lot, but a dozen or so who came by just to view the online exhibit. And we had some little exhibition glitches there, but we'll try and work those out to make sure that we have all of the exhibit up and running with all of the monitors and all of the projections and that sort of thing this coming First Friday. So anyways, that's a little bit of physically what's going on in our space. We have also a member exhibition. We totally, like, normally, right in the past like month or so, we would have had our member exhibition of typically 100 to 110 or so people who are artists who contribute to the organization and who submit work. So it's kind of a three-pronged thing there. People who contribute to us, people who happen to be artists who contribute to us, and then people who happen to be in the show. So so there's a real wide range of things there, and we've got that up in a new area of our website that's called Member Art, artist members. And so look that up. Maybe we'll have a little view of that next month here at Well Read as to what's going on in that. We've been doing these little previews at Well Read, and as well as at Flash Fiction Forum, which Works then hosts and helps out with fostering the curation of, and we continue to contribute just monetarily to what the costs are for PCSJ and other groups. And we really love to see, like, all y'all here, and check out our shows, see how that we're getting involved. Follow us as well on Facebook. Just punch in Work San Jose on Facebook. WRKSSANJOSE at the end of Facebook, that slash, just like Poetry Center San Jose at the end of that / on Facebook, and follow what we're both up to. So I'm going to give it back to my fellow board member on PCSJ, as well as my dearest friend in the world. He's over here for me. I don't know where the hell he is for you, but I've got it on grid. So right there, but I don't know where he is, but right there is Rob Pesich. Right.
I'm moving around a lot. I had 6 cups of coffee today, so.
Is that all? Is that all? Hey, by the way, the bar is open.
Oh, yes,
so
thank you.
Go to the back of the gallery, and if you can, yeah.
I want to thank now Lucille Langday for coming to us with this great and important program. Many thanks to Lucille for bringing us all together here. She's the author of 7 full-length collections of poetry and 4 poetry chapbooks. Her latest collection is Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place. And she has also co-edited 2 anthologies, of course, Fire and Rain, Ecopoetry of California, and Red Indian Road West, Native American Poetry from California, and published 2 children's books and a memoir, Married at 14, A True Story. She's has many honors and accolades, and so now I would like all of us to welcome Lucille to the mic, and she will introduce Molly Fisk, and also we will have Ruth Nolan, 2 blessed poets bringing together this program tonight. Please now welcome Lucille.
She's muted.
Okay.
I've got it. Okay. Now
Very
I'm
good.
unmuted. So thank you very much, Rob. I'm just really thrilled that we could do this program here tonight. And it's wonderful to see not only the Fire and Rain readers, but also the California Fire and Water readers, many of whom I know. I'm really happy to see them, and I'm really happy to hear also the people that I don't know and whose work I would be hearing for the first time. So we're going to start out the program tonight with Molly Fisk and the California Fire and Water poets.
That's right. California Fire and Water, a climate crisis anthology. If you haven't seen the cover, it's this amazing cover. And also the cover designer is with us, Maxima Kahn. She's one of the poets in the book, but she's also been designing books for me for 20 years now, maybe. Thanks, Rob, for having us here. And Lucy, what a great idea it was to put these 2 anthologies together. I just love this abundance. So this book contains 145 poems from people who are between the ages of 8 and 85. It's part of a project I did. I got a grant from the Academy of American Poets that went to Poets Laureate. And my project had 3 parts. One was sending teachers into California schools from California poets in the schools to get students to write about climate crisis, because we had just had the campfire very near to where I lived. And I kept thinking over and over again about all those kids and how they were having class in people's living rooms and Quonset huts and basketball courts. You know, they were just so displaced in so many ways. And I really do believe that poetry can help people process trauma and heal and come to grips with all sorts of things, not least climate crisis. We started out, the book was about climate change, but during the year that we were working on it, it became climate crisis. You're about to see Sid come into view, I think, who is my 22-year-old cat, who gets to do whatever he wants to because he's so old. But he can't stand on the piece of paper I'm thinking about. Anyway, the first project was sending teachers into schools. Then we collected poems from kids and from adults. I put this anthology together with 4 co-editors, Kirsten Casey, Lisa Alvarez, Julie Valin, and Chris Olander. And it was really wonderful working with everybody else and having such a good time sorting through what did this mean and what were the poems like and who was, you know, I was trying very hard to have the widest possible range of poets, both in terms of racial and sexual diversity, in terms of geography, in terms of anything I could think of. And the only place I failed, which one of my own magazine editors pointed out to me, was that I wasn't thinking at all about making sure I had enough men in the anthology. And he was quite surprised and a little dismayed that there aren't as many, it isn't a 50-50 breakdown, it's more like 28% men. And I thought to myself that that was funny. So we're gonna read, 10 of us are gonna read our poems. Each of us is gonna read our own poem from the anthology and then one more poem that might be from the anthology or it might be something else that we've written about climate crisis. And we're gonna start off with Opal Palmer Adisa.
And so we are. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to be included in this very important anthology. So I just want to say good evening. And, you know, for us, those of us who have lived in California, fires and for people all over the world, disasters are believed to be horrible and they are for people and horrible for people and even for some animals. That is just one side. And the other side, the point of view I took in this poem and in these poems that I'm working on is Mother Nature working at rebalancing and aligning herself from some of the mistakes we've made and the careless decisions we have made without consideration for either nature or the animal world. And this is the poem that's in the anthology, and it's Defying Faith, F-A-T-E. They warned us, yes, they did, but we refused to listen. The location was so beautiful, high above everyone, remote, peaceful, our perfect getaway, and was for 10 years. Now I wade through ashes, hoping to find evidence of a life lived, a future we had bargained on. And I'm going to read 2 other short poems that also speaks to the theme, defamation. Why do you insist on defaming me? I'm only doing what I must. This is not about people and their home. It's about preparing the earth for new growth. And the last short poem, Fire, Water, People. If there was a way we could all cohabit in the same place at the same time, heat and liquid, people and needs, truth is once we did, with an understanding of our interdependency. What happened to that ethos, that knowing, that sharing, when love and compassion, need and community were the light post, and fear and greed didn't confuse us? Once, stored in memory, lives the answer when fire and water were inseparable mates. And now I'm happy to introduce the next reader, Kirsten Casey.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here tonight with all of you. I'm going to be reading my poem, Learning About Trees. Notice first that they are tall, beyond the power poles that bend and spark under the weight of January snow. The trees know their yoga, have stretched and bowed only to return square-shouldered in proper posture. Please recognize the deep moles, blackened by lightning strikes, in the thick bark that was once sapling skin, now ragged and squirrel abused, a home and a maypole and a scratching post. Most of the roots are hidden, bulging wooden veins. They hold trees to the ground, heavy, primitive ship anchors, eventually rusting and rotting through. When the trees are old enough, they fall because their insides are now beetles, or the wind shifts to the north, or there's not enough water, or the late winter soil is too drenched and has to let go. You've already seen the diagram, know the arrow's path, all of that oxygen and carbon dioxide. And you've read that slim green book about a boy who sold his tree in pieces and ended up old on a stump. This isn't to warn you, but just to let you know that sometimes they outlive the people in their shade, with their wide trunks and mysterious rings and treetop perspective. Sometimes they burn, cracking and shaking hands in a bluster of sparks. Sometimes people carve letters into them, a scar they cannot read, in a language that is not their own. And the second poem I'm going to be reading is from one of my students. I'm a California poet in the schools, and I was one of the poets that was sent in to help teach for the anthology. And this is, the prompt was to write about our town, which burnt many, many times in the 1800s. And they had to write from the point of view of somebody who experienced fire in our own town. So this is called Nevada City Fire of 1856, and it's by my student Olivia Willoughby, who is a freshman at Nevada Union High School last year. I saw the cloud of black smoke crawling over Nevada City like a black cat sneaking up on a sparrow. The screams like screeching minecart brakes, trying to stop, but failing. The smell of burning wood drifted over the town like the rolling waters of the Yuba. I tasted the ashes as they fell in my mouth like bitter snow drifting. I turned around. The fire was nipping at my ankles like a dog biting at a cow's hooves. It raced around my skirt, brushing against my legs like mountain misery on a windy summer day. The scorching heat blistered my skin, popping like bubbles on the rapids of the Yuba. I tried to run away, but the flames caught my skin. I closed my eyes to let the pain wash over me, like sinking underwater, watching the waves move over me. And now I would like to introduce Molly Fisk.
Sid, you have to get off the book. I'm going to read you a poem by Junior Gutierrez called The Drought Happened. He last year was a 5th grader at Selma Herndon Elementary in Livingston. Yes, I love you too. The drought happened. It stopped raining. The aquifers dried up. Since there was no water, there were no crops. And since no crops, no food. And no food, nothing to eat for animals and nothing to eat for humans. Everyone was starving. The drought went on for many years. And this is my poem, Particulate Matter. If all you counted were tires on cars left in driveways and stranded beside the roads, melted dashboards and taillights, oil pans, window glass, seatbelt clasps, the propane tanks in everyone's yards, though we didn't hear them explode, R13 insulation, paint inside and out, the liquor store's plastic letters in puddled colors below their charred sign, each man-made sole of every shoe in all those closets, the laundromat's washers' round metal doors. But then Arco, Safeway, Walgreens, the library, everything they contained. How many miles of electrical wire and PVC pipe swirling into the once blue sky? How many linoleum acres? Not to mention the valley oaks, the ponderosas, all the wild hearts and all the tame, their bark and leaves and hooves and hair and bones, their final cries, and our neighbors, so many particular, precious, irreplaceable lives that despite ourselves, we're inhaling. Let's get off this again. Rafael Jesus Gonzaléz, it is your turn.
Thank you. And I'll share two poems with you. I'm known by many as the lunatic poets, so there are two of my moon poems. Luna plena en verano de sequía. La luna plena se eleva con un tinte rojizo del humo de los bosques encendidos. En la sequía, las aguas que levantaría se escasean, como el salmón en los ríos. Su color, al aparecer, es ese del perturbio en la sangre. Full moon in a dry season. The full moon rises with a reddish tint from the smoke of the forests burning. In the drought, the waters she would lift grow scarce as the salmon in the streams. Her color, it would seem, is that of the disquiet in the blood. And luna druida. La luna llena, que se debería llevar un tinte azul, sale por entre las ramas del roble, del encino, con tinte naranja, debido al humo de los bosques en llamas, como los velos más raros entre el mundo de los vivos y el mundo de los muertos, como creían los druidas de esta noche de su año viejo. Todos salimos enmascarados, no para protegernos de espíritus malignos, sino para protegernos unos a los otros de la peste que nos trae la muerte. No tememos ni brujas ni espantos, mas a los hombres, mujeres de corazón carcomido, locos de codicia y poder, injustos y crueles, votamos por la vida o por la muerte en este crucero del tiempo. Druid moon. The full moon that should have a tint of blue rises among the branches of the oaks with a tinge of orange, due to the smoke of the forest on fire, like the thinnest veils between the world of the living and the world of the dead, as the Druids believed of this night of their old year. We all go out masked, not to protect ourselves from malignant spirits, but to protect one another from the plague that brings death. We do not fear witches nor ghosts, but the men, women with hearts of rot, crazed with greed and power, unjust and cruel. We vote for life or for death at this crossroads of time. Unfortunately, we voted for life. Let's hope that it bears fruit. And it's my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Maxima Kahn.
Wow. Rafael Gonzaléz, I could listen to you all night. You are a conjurer with words. That was gorgeous. Thank you. Wow. I'm going to read my poem from the anthology. Those who are following along, it's on page 90, End of Days. At first, the day is spacious without power, clocks stopped, sun bright, action stilled, the autumn halted in its falling. No wind, though wind was predicted, the reason the electricity was shut down. Light over everything, shadows cast by fallen leaves, shadows in the mind being swept one by one, a planetary feeling or failing. The nearest creek only 1.5 miles. We could walk for water, carry our jugs as of old. I think about Armageddon, meaning the end of the power grid, the internet, this way of life. I think about sharing my own words, about Frederick, the mouse poet, how he was needed in the dark, cold days. I think about the end of ambition and find a stream flowing through my mind. But where will we get food? Every other problem I think I can solve with simplicity. A hole dug for a toilet, the fire pit for warmth. The gazania are still blooming, keen orange maned faces, though the garden is covered in shadow and a deeper shade is falling. And I'm going to read one more, also inspired by the planned power shutoffs. This one's called Another Power. What matters is the way the wind is blowing, how its cold tongue laps my ear, the racket of blue jays squabbling, not these incessant generators roaring because we cannot live without electricity for an hour, having lost our true power long ago. The electricity has been turned off because the wind is howling, might tear trees loose, take out power poles, start a blaze. But outside, this aliveness keeps igniting. Goldfinches flit bright flashes from branch to branch. Gold leaves of oak parachute to ground. We are carpeted in gold, while inside, people huddle in front of glinting screens, requiring the roaring that rattles this autumn day. What matters is homes turning to skeletons glazed with fire and smoke, clogging skies, raining ash in our hair, because we have scorched our hearts but not tended the forests with the careful burning they need, neglected the underbrush growing tangled mats in our souls. Let the crazed greed of the few overrun the hunger of so many, allowed division to score us and isolation cut us from our tribes. What matters is dousing the noise polluting, air polluting, fossil fuel consuming generators and lighting the lamps inside our hollow bodies, dimmed so long. What matters is mourning our grievous error, uncountable loss, and the darkness that surrounds us until the weeping clears a swath, a charred place where new sprouts grow slowly from scored seeds. And we might not make it. We know that now. What constitutes making it anyhow? What matters most is this sunlight spreading gold wings over the lost, fallen world. And up next is Devi Laskar.
Thank you, Maxima. That was beautiful. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm going to read the poem that's in the anthology. It's on page 102. Ars Poetica with Red Riding Hood. Suppose she moves to the edge of the forest, spends her time staring into the eyes of night from the window. Suppose she was raised to be unafraid of hunger and loneliness, well-heeled wolves. Suppose it's a symbolic journey, that little girl from the red hood confronting the demon. Suppose the moral arc of that story points back to the paying audience waiting to be entertained. The girl outwits the wolf and saves the grandmother, right? Suppose the girl is charmed by the cloak she wears, its bloody color, a bullfighter's flag beckoning, or a cheap travel-sized lipstick from the convenience store. Suppose the distance between the ordinary world and the denouement could be measured by a lie detector. Suppose that girl is not a girl. Suppose she too is a wolf. Suppose she is a lot older than the storyteller pretends her to be. Then it's another Persephone and Hades story, I suppose. We all know what happens next. 5 red seeds causing the invention of perennial winter. The wolf swallows the grandmother whole before the girl rescues her, right? No one ever mentions the crops burning, how the girl in red is a match, setting the world in its old-fashioned ways alight. How it won't stop, this burning, until trees and fields reduce to charcoal, until the blinding smoke lifts, a new landscape is drawn. So the next poem I'm going to read is from the anthology by Ren Tuatha. It's on page 154. And here we go. Proxima Centauri, or Anniversary of the Fire. And the epigraph is, tell me what you know about dismemberment, from Panu Kapil. Its literalness, the resistance of the dead bay branch through loppers into my wrist and elbow, mutual rigidity, what the tree and I saw of consuming flame that morning, the bone and crack and hunt of it. Its joining, my fulcrum on the tool, arthritis in fingers and shoots, our fibers under skins, container identity, acceptance, the tree and me of it, absorbing the sun on a November day that shouldn't be this warm. The way the virus of weather is personal and really not. Hiker and boots to ants carrying food. The virus of weather leaves us defined as survivors, watchful, while processing our dead branches. The stupid green of it, leafing a young bay salad at the trunk. The DNA of persistence without a basis, the red berry cluelessness. One single offering held forward on a new growth green hand. A deer or bear might carry its seeds to the next canyon. So I will tell you what I know about fire. It meets you where you burn, says do over, do differently. Remember that you're an animal. It knows you. Spark on a fingertip across a cat's back or Proxima Centauri, keeping its gravitational distance. My dismemberment from a green safe home is so much code in the stir of earth and her Me Too rages. There's a theory. We plants and animals are just vehicles, time machines to carry our DNA forward. So stupid me for composing little poems instead of stepping down from world dominance and disgrace. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Indigo Moor.
Well, thank you. When I first heard that a friend of mine's house had burned, I was listening to Adam Ben Ezra, who's a jazz bassist, and he was playing with a quartet. The party crashers of paradise. We bum rushed the stage, this gig in Butte County. 100 flaming fan dancers open for us. Take the town like fire fruit dropped in hell. a blackout curtain tossed over the sun. The drummer goes hi-hat on some propane tanks and shit got real. Crowd squeal tone deaf. Nothing croons like charred pines or an arpeggio of screeching hawks. A microbus slumps into a Mercedes behind a burning bush. It's paradise, these things happen. We showcase crippled deer chewing singed hooves, a scorched tabby in a bird bath, knotted oaks and pine cones erupting like Roman candles. Our crooner scats embers over the middle school like rainbows through the blind eye of the monkey bars. First, burrowing owls are baked into tender bites. Then a grandmother. Roasted manna hails down, picking the locks on a child's lungs until the wailing of fire engines finds its twin before lurching to a dead crescendo. After 17 days, we've torched everything except the Starbucks. We own our sacred altars, our angry gods of Wi-Fi. The fire marshal shuts us down. There's a blood cry in the curtain calls. The whole damn town was screaming, something like an encore. And I'm going to read Untitled by Gary Young. The fire spared our house, turned toward the winery, and bolted down the canyon. Everyone assumed the grapes on the ridge were a loss. But when I opened a bottle of Pinot from the vineyard here on Battle Mountain, 2009, the year of the blaze, the scent of ashes on the cork, and I taste the true terroir of home, sun and rain, minerality from the granite soil and catastrophe. In this vintage, there's dark chocolate and briar in the glass, strawberry and plum in the mouth, and in the finish, smoke. And next up, we have Sarah Pape.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone reading tonight. I'm gonna read my poem from the anthology, and it was written on the year anniversary of the campfire, which just passed again this last Sunday. Sanctuary at dusk. We drive the back roads to catch snow geese at fly-off, watch the blue skyline unfettered, but for the wisps of rice field smoke. Their bodies gathered in the runoff, white and cacophonous, as if their team scored. The crowd roars. Mosquitoes weave above our heads, herding language, caution between us and the mirrored moon in the arms of waterlogged trees. They lift in shifts, flapping, shimmering feathers against an ochre horizon, their calls to each other louder still. Farewell, we sing. You beauties, she says. In the fringe of cluttered figures, lines write them into more than arrows. An errant goose goes against the pack to her place in the shape she knows. It has been 1 year since the end of our belief in the world's survival. In its place, a hue of smoke and cold that crossed out the sun. I think we will never not know how it ends. Next to me, she gasps again and again, this moment of departure. And I just have one other. Pretty much anything I write, since the campfire has some sort of smoke in it. Drought becomes the world coming next. Seasons borrowed from time and aquifer. Banks crumble, every orifice is of water. Planting 3 trees on the first day of this new year says, I don't believe plenty is gone. Fruit will hang bright against the smoke, perhaps without my hand to twist them loose. Rain remembers itself as fullness, as one end meeting the other. Before the torrents stopped, fences were our loneliness, separate from what cannot be. Now cannot is. We are done and undone in shapes yet to assert themselves. And our next reader is Kim Shuck.
Hi, I'm really pleased to be here, coming to you from unceded Ramaytush territory, Yalama. War. And in the water war, we will paint signs of bravery and protection onto the salmon, the trout, and wade into the streams with them, and they will paint us back. In the war of clear water, we will insist that water be local, and when it can't be local, we will weigh the benefit to the real costs of lawns in the desert or apricots and almonds. We will seek to understand the other people's prayers and what gets flooded by dams or drained by canals. And we'll consult the birds about the wetlands, and they might paint us too. And the consulting board will offer seats to the pines and sunflowers because they defended us the last time. And the wolves and beavers who changed the streams will also be heard. And we cannot lose this one. We must not lose. This is my piece from the book. It's called Always Fire Season. Flame reads the stories of tree rings out loud and for the last time. Thursday, our kitchen fire alarms went off, breathing lives as we were, breathing the collected things of lives, the fur and claws, the feathers, the ID cards, and photographs of pocket lamps. Here in the bay, our sunrises and sunsets have changed. Extreme wildfire, part of the new normal weather, and always fire season. We know the forests by when they burned, whose ashes on our windshield, whose ashes in our skin, in our lungs. The cars, immobile, fused into the melted roadway. Less rain, cracked lips of hillside, flaking skin of floodplain, and the dice roll of pet sparks, conditionally captured in wire, running the dry west, curled and silvered fingers of pine as monuments. And the next reader is Alan Soldofsky.
Hello, everybody. First, I'm the last reader for the California Fire and Water Anthology, and I want to thank Molly Fisk. I know this has been a trying time for Molly. And Molly, you've done a superb job getting this book together. Hearing just a sample of these poets, it's really remarkable work. And I'm very, very proud to be selected to be included. I'm going to read the poem that was included, and then a new poem that's coming out in December in Catamaran. Both poems are included in my book in progress, which is called See Something, Say Something. These are one-word title poems. From the California Fire and Water, here's a poem called Anxiety. You feel the friction on the front porch when the wind switches around to the north. Jets roaring overhead, taking off the wrong way. It's the start of fire season. The tan oaks and eucalyptus have dried out. The air is sinking, gusting over the ridge tops. At dusk, a sallow half moon ascends through the branches like something coughed up. There's a red flag warning. If it won't cool down, they'll cut off the power, because all this brush might go up in flames like last year when the high tension lines exploded and a whole town nearly burnt to nothing. There's a faint scent of skunk in the gutter, the pavement overcooked. How will you live without AC or refrigeration? The food will spoil and you'll sweat through your sheets. You can't stop yourself from twitching all night in your bed, huffing the darkness. An orange aura glowers above the hills where you suspect the birds have gone. A flock of swallows twittering in the distant skies. Once in a while, you find one of their scorched electric bodies laying on the ground, a bit of feathered putty, half buried under a mound of ashes, which you carefully step around, not to crush it with your hot and swollen feet. And this second poem is called Urgent. I did have a draft of it in the before times, as we call them, but now that we're not in the before times, I had to revise it in galleys so that the poem worked better for now. It's called Urgent. Light scraped up from the beach on the other side of the mountain. Air thick with particles, pointillism through a tinted windshield. Driving west, I squint through sunbeams. It's the end of vacation, and I do not like it. Last night, the full moon was orange. We expected it to be blue. I want to get lost at each turnoff, but can't. I have to get back to the usual lack of privacy. I should take the shortest way home. Instead, we drive up switchbacks over a dry pass, dusk fading too early behind us. It's picturesque, but something's lurking on the horizon. I don't want to know what's coming as we steer back toward the coast. When I'm gone too long, it nags me not to be home, though I still want to be someplace else where the trees are different. The breeze here is too familiar, too Mediterranean, though that's not where I am. Are other lives so circumscribed by time and distance? I can't say what seems so urgent. The smell of heat after dark, grass giving off its last withered scent. I'm not sure where we are, but it seems the few restaurants that are here are closed. Pump jacks, like strange birds, bow to themselves near the roadside, fenced off in the glare of sodium vapor lamps, as a shooting star streaks over the dim one-way street we're driving on. Thank you very much.
Wow. So many powerful and important poems. This has been, yeah, just terrific hearing all of these poems. It's really exciting. I'm glad that we're reading from these two anthologies tonight. It's really amazing. So I see that Molly has put a link in here for people who want to be able to find Fire and Water, California Fire and Water. And I am also going to paste in links to Fire and Rain, my own website, and Scarlett Tanager Books, my press. So, as you know, I'm Lucille Langday, and I'm the publisher of Scarlett Tanager Books, as well as the co-editor of this anthology, Fire and Rain, Ecopoetry of California. My co-editor, Ruth Nolan, and I are giving all of the profits from this anthology to 7 environmental organizations. I trained as a biologist before I became a poet, so questions of biology have always been central to my poetry. And Fire and Rain is an anthology about California ecosystems. The anthology is divided into 8 sections corresponding to major bioregions of California. For example, there's a section on coast and ocean, there's a section on the coastal redwoods, a section on the desert, and so forth. And Ruth and I called the book Fire and Rain because fire and rain are so important in shaping California ecosystems. As it turns out, fire has a good and normal role to play in shaping California ecosystems. There were wildfires here long before there were people, mostly started by lightning. And many California species have evolved not only to endure fires, but to thrive in them. The cones of some conifers don't open to release their seeds until there's a fire. But so historically, fires have been fine. Now, however, things have gotten completely out of hand. And this year, California has had its worst fire season ever, and it isn't even over yet. What's changed from the past is the impact of human activity. First, we have climate change. And this year, California has had its highest temperatures ever. That's combined with years of drought. And not surprisingly, when everything is very hot and dry, things catch fire easily, and the fires are very hard to put out. This situation is exacerbated by population growth that's resulted in people moving into wild areas that are prone to fires, and that leads to loss of buildings and lives. And on top of all of that, we have a reckless power company, PG&E, which has consistently put profits before people and safety. PG&E has many transmission towers that are more than 100 years old, and power lines that aren't properly insulated. When these power lines blow down, they start fires. Fixing these would be minimal, but in truth, I believe at least, all of the power lines in wild areas should be underground. For the anthology Fire and Rain, I was fortunate to have Ruth Nolan as a co-editor. Ruth is a professor of English and creative writing at the College of the Desert in Palm Desert, California. But that's not all. Ruth is a former wildland firefighter. So she's highly qualified to be a co-editor of this anthology.
Okay, welcome everybody, and I'm very happy to be here tonight. I had this great idea. I'm going to ask Lucy in September, thinking about the intense devastation statewide this year, all summer long with epic heat, the pandemic, isolation, wildfires, and I thought it would be really great to have a reading to help unify people from across our state based on the fact that our Fire and Rain Ecopoetry of California anthology beautifully synthesizes and harmonizes poetry and voices from around our beautiful state. And I know that we have been hit so hard this year in our state on so many levels, with especially wildfire, smoke, and drought, and in the desert where I live, extreme severe heat. We had 100 consecutive days this summer in Palm Springs, over 100 degrees. So think about that. Nearly one third of our entire year of 2020, we endured temperatures of 100 degrees plus without a break. And we also had multiple 120 plus degree heat days, which I've never experienced here in 20 years. I felt that we've all been hurting, and so many of us, I'm one of the lucky ones. I was not displaced. I did not have to live through wildfires, but my heart has been with all of my friends and families from around the state. And I just felt really called to, this idea to have a reading to help unify us and use the beauty and power of poetry to do so. And Lucy immediately responded, yeah, let's do it. And she had suggested we need absolutely to bring Molly in and see if she would like to work as well. And I just thought, this is as good as it can be. Molly's incredible new book. The readings you all just did are just completely amazing. So happy we're able to join forces here for this reading tonight. And it really is very special that we're all here tonight. I'm a little distracted. I must say that I just lost my father a few days ago after a long illness, and I'm a little distracted, so I can't remember if I'm supposed to introduce our next reader. I think I am, but Lucy is off. So the Fire and Rain people, can you guys, does anyone know who's the next reader is? And I apologize so much.
Susan Cohn.
Susan Cohn, okay. Lucy, do you happen to have, would you be able to introduce Susan to read?
Toby Hiller is supposed to read next.
Oh, Toby Hiller is our next.
Yes, Toby Hiller is our next reader.
And do you have her bio? I'm a little bit overloaded by everything.
Okay, so Toby Hiller is a widely published poet and fiction writer. Her latest book of poems, Crow Mind, was published by Finishing Line in June 2020.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Toby. I'm sorry for the glitch.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. And thank you, Molly. It is really an honor and a privilege to be part of the anthology that Lucy and Ruth put together, and part of this reading and this gathering of poets thinking about fire and rain and the environment. I'm very happy to be here. This poem that I'm going to read is called Red. It's the fifth poem in a series about the environment, and it was written about a fire that took place in Siskiyou County some time ago, Siskiyou and Lake counties. Great plumes and fluffs of cumulus, no, white smoke, bellies wide behind Mount Shasta. Red haze bleeds up over Mount Eddy and the marbles spreads. It is a Turner sky scorched into dreamy rose. Below, inferno. Char, flake, ash blacken the hoods of cars. Sky billows thick, blushes and falls on roof tree, bush, shoulder, barn, all that waits and runs and stands here below. Beyond the ridges, air baked into smudge and glue. Animals run, brush darkens in the crimson, shimmers, trembles into cinder. Roar of fire, tornadoes up the canyons. Whirled cauldron, pines explode, nitrogen flies free. The West Coast's on fire, north and south, and we are tinder, prophesied in this red future's unhoped, and shall we call it healing, breath. And now I'm going to read, actually, I'm going to read, I'm going to introduce and read for her Maureen Epstein's poem. She's unable to be with us today. She's not feeling well. Her most recent poetry collection is Horizon Line, published by Main Street Rag in 2020. She lives on the Mendocino coast, about 30 miles from her special place, Montgomery Woods State Reserve. And this poem was written, Montgomery Woods burned in the Mendocino Complex fire of 2010. This poem describes how it looked 2 years later. It's called Redwood Grove After Fire. Crunch of black fragments underfoot, faint whiff of char, earth beside the trail fresh broken where a burned tree fell, as they sometimes do years later. Cave walls of the hollow giants gleam with fresh scorch. Ferns have returned to the flat, though sparser now. More logs among them fallen. We celebrate survival. Redwood sorrel has spread its green salve over ashy ground, warty and wrinkled. The old ones stand in their accustomed silence. And the next reader is Susan Cohen. She'll, wait, is that correct? And yeah, Susan Cohen will now read. Where's her bio? I'm afraid I don't have her bio.
I have it, I can read it.
Okay, that would be terrific. Sorry.
Susan Cohen is the author of 2 poetry collections, Throat Singing and A Different Wakeful Animal, and she lives in Berkeley.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm delighted to be with you all tonight. The poem that Lucy asked me to read, Golden Hills of California from the anthology, I realized is an artifact really from a time when our wildfires changed the light hundreds of miles away, sometimes in beautiful ways. It was almost, if you've lived in California long enough, you may remember the guilty pleasure of this beautiful light and suddenly realizing it was from a fire. Now, of course, our fires are so massive and so close that they make it difficult to breathe. Golden Hills of California. This light began in lamentation, but I don't want to think about the unmaking, the burning hopes and homes 100 miles from here. This light is strangely sown with honey, as if thimbled from the flight of bees. It drifts down through the maples and the cedar, burnishes our scarred floorboards to yellow oak this morning, our walls to butter. In the fabled state we live in, somewhere always is on fire. Dry grasses torching, shingles searing, latches melting, miles of forest reduced to the single syllable of ash, while elsewhere that combustion blends light and gold we can savor like wine, which also begins with crushing. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Benjamin Gucciardi, whose first book, West Portal, will be published by the University of Utah Press in 2021. It was selected by Gabrielle Calvo-Corresi for the Aga Shahid Ali Prize in Poetry.
Thanks so much, Susan. Yeah, that was a beautiful poem. And Ruth, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for your loss. It's a hard time, and hopefully all these poems can be dedicated to you.
Very sweet.
I'm gonna read a poem called Scavengers. Wildfire has scorched 47 acres in the valley below the house where I am staying. And now 3 slow vultures trace black circles through the haze. Descend, feast, climb, repeat. I want to combine myself with the world that way, finding succor in the char. If no clouds bring relief, let us place our fingers like crimson beaks into the burn of our lives and endure. And I'm going to introduce Donna Emerson. Donna Emerson lives in Petaluma and frequently writes about nature and our endangered world. Her recently published 6th poetry collection, Beside the Well, contains many poems about water.
I'm hoping that my poem will take us to some relief from the fires. I wrote this poem on the first day of rain in 2017 after 4 years of drought. The poem is called First Rain. As I hurtle north, sudden rain pelts my car windows, a cascade of pearls. I leave the wipers off, my breath deepens, my speed slows. When I can't see the road anymore, I pull to the side, next to the field above Novato, in Godmother's pumpkin patch. I take off layers of clothes to feel the rain, slip out of the car, watch it land on dry shoulders, creped arms. Cool rills bathe me, new smells of fresher air, sage, dripping water I can feel after 4 years of drought. Wet soaking deep into thirsty skin, water puddling above my collarbone, sheets of water gathering until rivulets form, running down thighs to my feet. The surprise of this rain makes its own music on hard surfaces around me, rocks, posts, snare drums played with brushes, on the bending grasses, the upper strings of a harp. Ravel crosses his left hand over his right before the glissando in judo, glittering rain. Dust rising from the cracked ground, the dirt smelling almost like earth again. Lighter than before, silvery, salvaged, surfeited. I sit down against a fence post, shaking water from my hair, touching drops in my ears, eyes, dry mouth open to rainwater's christening. And now I have the pleasure of introducing my neighbor in Sebastopol, Iris Jamahl Dunkle, who was our Poet Laureate in Sonoma County, 2017 and 18. She's the author of 4 poetry collections, and Charmian Kittredge London, Trailblazer, author, adventurer, the first full-length biography of Charmian London, Jack London's wife.
Thank you so much, Donna. It was so nice to hear that poem about rain after all this fire. And I am not actually outside right now. I'm in, I have a backdrop, and this is Jack London State Historic Park. It's Charmian Kittredge London's home. And I just got the great pleasure of spending the last 6 years researching and writing about her life. And so I'm going to take you back to the Laguna de Santa Rosa, which is a one of the largest watersheds in Northern California. And this is kind of a brief history of this laguna. Moon over Laguna de Santa Rosa. A rueful moon drifts over Laguna de Santa Rosa tonight. River that flows both ways, carrying history heavy on its back. Those who first recorded what they saw were in awe of the wooded plain, ripe with water and animal life. But change was quick and drastic. First, the cattle ranchers cleared and burned the live oaks, leaving their blackened bodies to girdle the golden tule fields. Then the gold rush increased the price of game, white and gray geese, ducks, deer, antelope, elk, even the few grizzlies that had survived were caught and sold on the docks of the Petaluma River. The remaining oaks split and corded or reduced to charcoal. Then channels were dug to drain the cattle farms. Then the sewage ponds were dug and filled. Today, the moon hangs low in the sky, not full, just a fingernail, illuminating a single path back, past the remaining oaks, past forgetting. And the last poem I'm going to read, also from the anthology, it's called The 100-Year Flood, and it's from 1986. And in the Russian River Valley in Sonoma County, when I was growing up, there was what we called the 100-Year Flood that supposedly was one of a kind. It was the only one that would ever happen. And then 10 years later, we had another 100-year flood. And it starts with a quotation from Gay LeBaron, who's a local historian in Sonoma County. But people are like that about natural disasters. Everyone believes that the history of any place began the day they arrived. Gay LeBaron. The 100-Year Flood. Memory is as uncertain as islands that rise in a flood. You don't know what lurks underneath. A silver boat can split the seam of water, even gone muddy, gone untold for so long. Disasters rise and stay like high watermarks in the unconscious, and each day after is checked against it. What do we have to fear? The worst already happened, couldn't happen again. But the river, like a muscular animal, overtakes the banks, chews up asphalt, rises more to fill stores and homes until the whole Russian River Valley is filled with her muddy, pulsing body, regardless of what history you remember. And I get the great honor of introducing Susan Kelly DeWitt, whose most recent book, Gravitational Tug, was published by Main Street Rag in 2020. She's a member of the National Book Critics Circle, the Northern California Book Reviewers Association, and a contributing editor for Poetry Flash.
All right, I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to Lucy and to Ruth for the chance to be in this book. And thanks to Molly for all her work on the other one and everybody putting this reading together. I'm going to read two poems from the section on rivers, lakes, and lagoons. We live very close to where the American River and the Sacramento come together. And we live beneath Folsom Dam and not very far from the levees. The first poem is called Floodplain. A mile from here, the levee holds back the Sacramento's rushing tons. No oil slick of sun floats where it coils in its depths. This valley was all water once, a rich inland soup of sea, a tidal broth. The river wants to reclaim it, the shiny tract houses, those debtors in arrears that line the lanes and cul-de-sacs like coins lining an ancient purse. It wants to snap the purse shut. It wants a return to the old flesh-eating rituals. Don't let the heart-shaped leaves of the cottonwoods planted so fluidly in rows, fool you as they sift the morning light along the levee, as they blossom with branches of swallows and lift your weary spirit with their jitter of bird song and green shimmer. They have nothing to do with that other cold heart, the river. Time to grow gills or gull wings, walker. Learn the jackknife, half twist, pike. And the next one is called Valentine. All winter the earth was this dark, wet envelope. The tides rose, receded, rose, receded. The river took a long time to say what it needed. The water was the color of oolong tea mixed with a little dirty milk. The city and all its fortified levees were only cracked vessels that could not hold it. The rush of current broke free, swallowing people, cattle, houses, trees. Now this delicate fringe of redbud blossoms lacing the river's dry edges. Now I'm going to introduce Kathleen McClung. Her chapbook, A Juror Must Fold In on Herself, won the 2020 Rattle Chapbook Prize, and her other poetry collections include Temporary Kin, The Typists Play Monopoly, and Almost the Rowboat. Gualala Winter is the only poem in both Fire and Rain and California Fire and Water. So Kathleen, to you.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be part of this amazing reading and so grateful for all these beautiful poems. I'm also really happy and grateful to say that it's raining in San Francisco as I speak, and hopefully it will keep raining and just raining and raining and raining. I'm going to read a sonnet I wrote years ago on retreat by myself in Sonoma County, and there was this downpour that was sort of scary to me. This sonnet is called Gualala Winter. Keep dreaming of gray deer asleep in woods as sheets of rain claim every living thing. Tailor bees, bracelet cones, chipmunks, hawk broods high up in nests that sway at last. Each wing, leaf, stem of fern soaked through, wet to the core, endures these January storms we track, evade behind our screens, our twice locked doors. Nervous, we curse old roofs, new leaks. Come back, mend quietly what's torn. Listen to wind. Confuse it with Pacific surf close by, cars crossing flooded roads. Gray deer may find logs hollowed out, may curl inside, stay mostly dry under mossed bark. Or not. Our sun will rise. Night storms will end. We animals open our eyes. And I'm just so honored and pleased to introduce Lucille Langday, whose most recent poetry collection, Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place, was released by Blue Light Press on November 1st. Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I'm going to conclude this reading with a poem that's in the appendix of Fire and Rain. It's called History of the Biosphere. It's in an essay that I wrote called Rhymes with Reason. And it puts the evolution of life on Earth in the context of the environmental destruction that we're experiencing. History of the biosphere. At first, no redwood scraped the sky with pointed leaves. No globular cones on ultimate twigs turned slowly from green to brown as they ripened. And no calliope hummingbirds with red streaked throats and slender beaks probed the necks of tubular flowers. There was no oxygen, just a boiling sea where gases streamed from the Earth's core. Millennia passed and membranes formed on rocks until self-replicating sacs were cells, insensate, sulfur metabolizing. The Earth cooled and countless generations of cells tumbled through the centuries. Then chloroplasts exhaled oxygen at last over oceans and land. The seas filled with sponges, anemones, and corals where crabs could hide and brightly colored fish could practice dances to attract mates. Long before, the first uncertain creatures crept out to deposit eggs in crystalline sand. Now ribosomes and chromosomes repeat the story, and humans with neurons tangled like a rainforest and 3 billion nucleotides lined up in their DNA gather round the fire to listen while the sky darkens with carbon and the planet with its orchids, figs, rubber trees, calliandras, and ferns, under canopies dense with hanging lianas, trembles as it burns and burns. So I think that the time we need to do something about this is now, whether it's climate change in California or burning rainforests in Brazil. We need to save not only California, but our whole beautiful planet, because we don't have a planet B.
Lucy, I was actually going to read. I don't know if I messed up by not reading sooner. Can I read when you're done?
Yes, you certainly can read. Yeah, you were supposed to read right after we introduced the anthology.
All right.
But better late than never.
Yeah, and you're are you done? Because you're speaking about wildfire in my poems.
Yeah. So your poem actually makes a great conclusion.
Perfect.
We can end with the evolution of life on Earth, and we can end with putting out fires.
Okay. Fabulous reading, everybody. I'm so excited to hear readings from some of the poets from Fire and Rain, whose works I hadn't heard read for one of our readings. So thank you for being here tonight. And thank you once again to everybody from Molly's incredible book. What a beautiful, beautiful book that is. In the 1980s, I worked as a wildland firefighter, a seasonal wildland firefighter, based in the California deserts and mountains, but I worked on fires all over the Western US. And we had to do something very frequently that's known as mopping up, which is a strange terminology for hard, brutal work, because it's something people associate with domestic work, which you must say, I guess, is in itself also pretty brutal and not much fun. It's just totally undersung. So many of the terminologies in fighting fires are amazingly domestic terms. And I've always found that kind of interesting, because typically when I was fighting fires, the majority of people out there were men. And it is still a pretty heavily male-dominated field, much to my consternation. So this poem is called Mopping Up. It's the most unraveled and well-paying job I've ever had, fighting fires in far-flung, fiery wilderness areas, all the way from the San Bernardino Mountains to the Panamint Mountains near Death Valley, the Southern Sierra, Yosemite, the Trinity Alps, the San Gabriel's looming jagged above LA. Most of the time, I was the only girl on the crew, cutting fire line, sucking down smoke, And after a fire had laid down across ravaged meadows and once forested slopes, our job would be far from done. We hiked in baked potato hot, ankle-deep ash that blew eerily in the wind, like shed snakeskins, to finish off dying wildfires by stirring and cooling the molten detritus with our extra sharpened shovels. To finish the job, we would spray dribbles of water from the fat bags that slashed like heavy vertigo on our backs, also known as piss pumps. We struggled to keep pace in the slowed down underbelly of burned up things in cherished, if little known, Golden State geographies. With lonely names: Rattlesnake Mountain, Horse Thief Spring, Last Chance Range, Toro Peak. Above us, the whispered remains of familiar forest trees, once familiar forest trees, lurking black, tall, and ragged, stripped of their dignity of their given names: Jeffrey Pine, Ponderosa, Western Sequoia, California Black Oak. And at our feet, the complete bequeathing of the latter fuels: manzanita, juniper, coyote brush, poison oak. We could never be sure that a fire was completely out, so we would stir and stir those ashes, sifting through what had been scorched, and watched each unearthed ember spark hot and red, then wish unto its puffy last breath. Occasionally, dead animals known jokingly as crispy critters. And this is what I remember most vividly from my firefighting days: the mopping up, making sure the fire was put to bed, soothing the feverish brow of forsaken land to cool them down. That, and how often the guys on the fire crews would ask me why I'd left behind the apron of my domesticity to flirt with flames instead of with them. Thanks. I'm still,
Thank you.
I don't have an answer to that, but.
Yeah, no, that was terrific. And also, I want to say thank you to everybody for your fabulous readings. Everybody was really wonderful.
Absolutely.
And now we're open to questions and comments from the audience. If anybody has something to add or something to ask. You know, feel free to unmute yourself if you have something that you want to say, or any questions.
Thank you for doing this. It is so late in the day and there is so much work to be done. And poetry and literature bring us closer to an answer and give us the kind of impetus to push forward, to rescue our grandchildren, to rescue our children. I'm horrified at my age to see how we've allowed this to happen.
Yeah, I agree. It is horrifying, but there's still a lot of hope. There's still time to reverse this. There's still time to save the planet, to change our
now.
Yeah, but we better hurry.
Yeah, that's right. We have to hurry.
No putting it off till tomorrow. The glaciers are disappearing. They're now suggesting that we're going to see a 20, 30 foot rise in the sea levels. I mean, you know. Silly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed tonight, and I'm happy I picked up a copy of the anthology at AWP this year. So that's the next book that I'm going to dive into reading.
Oh, great.
Lucy, how could we help you have more of these readings? I think everyone should hear them. As much for the peace it gives me, in a way, that we're all in this together. We're all going to do something about it. But people are suffering from isolation right now. They need evenings like this.
I agree. That's something we should work on.
Yeah, we are. I don't know if all of you know, you probably do, but we are creating another event, a similar event with other contributors to Fire and Rain on November 22nd. And so this is sort of our Northern California reading, right, Lucy, most people coming from NorCal. I know you guys like to be called NorCal. And they're doing another SoCal reading, and that's hosted by the Inlandia Institute. And that's on November 22nd. And of course, we'd love to have all of you. One of my ideas behind trying to do these readings was that I want to try to bring more unity to our entire state. Because as I saw with Lucy, that as we were going through all of the submissions for Fire and Rain and deciding to sort of organize the book by region, that there's so often sort of this disconnect. And I know there's some bad blood for a lot of good reason. The water, for example, we stole your guys' water, and I apologize for that. But
all right, we stole it from someone else.
Yeah, there you go. So it's all what goes around comes around. So, to unify not just people in a region, but to sort of make these connections across our entire state, because we all kind of went through a lot this summer, and I felt, due to politics, I don't want to get into it, but we were kind of on our own in California this summer, and probably for 4 years. And I think it gives us an opportunity to really perhaps move forward and redefine who we are, as citizens of this state. And, we really have amazing people here. So I would love to do more readings. Donna, your idea was just fantastic.
If I ask some community centers, for instance, that would be a welcome thing.
What?
If I ask some of our community centers here in the North Bay.
Sure.
I just call you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm personally open to ideas. I'm sure Lucy is. Lucy is fabulous at organizing events. You do a lot. You're so connected up there. And I sort of have my pulse here in SoCal, Southern California, but I have to say, I don't think we have as much really as you guys have up there, but I think it's time to try to make more of that happen here. The desert is even more so where I live in the desert. This is truly a desert. So we need all the poetry we can get here and events and connections to other parts of our state.
Yeah.
Bill,
especially now during the pandemic.
In the chat that everyone should share links to their favorite and most productive activist groups. And that's a brilliant idea. And we should do more than that. We should reach out to them and ask them to co-sponsor a reading with their members.
Yeah.
To expand the great community that we're trying to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful idea.
I've found that if you just call them up, they're all eager, because this is an opportunity for them to share something that is not just asking for money, but is building community and introducing them to new people.
And I think perhaps another way to build connections between, there seems to be so much division sometimes between people that are in the sciences and environment and the poets, I've been going to Sierra Club Desert Committee meetings for about the past 10 years. They're held in remote locations in the desert and California desert. And I started going to these and saying, like, could I read some poems? And maybe there were a few people that were like, oh, that's great. And many other people are just really kind of snobby, like, oh, poetry. Right. But I think it's definitely, we have to start coming together, as Fred suggested, with, infusing environmental and scientific people and groups with poetry, because we all really, truly more than ever have to work together. It's not enough for all these different, types, areas, the humanities and the sciences to be so separated.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately often that's the case, too much.
Yeah.
So together we're stronger, right?
I feel that way right now.
Yeah, why can't we do a Sierra Club poetry event? That's, why not? That has to happen. I think I'm gonna work on making that happen.
I was invited to write poetry for Tenants Together, which is a statewide tenants organization located in San Francisco. And it was so enormously successful. They held it at a bar, which we can't do right now, but there are things we can do. And a person would come up to me and say, I want you to write a poem about my dog. And after a beer or two, I was able to write poems about dogs. And it was a really wonderful experience. And the last time I did it, I did 3 times in a row. The last time I did it, I made $400 for the organization just off the crazy poems that I was writing, including one that ended up being kind of they asked me to read it at the statewide organization, which was it was called Red War Celebration Song, but the same thing can be done for the environment. In fact, the same thing can be done for everything. We are the court musicians. We are the jesters. We are the secret, silly wise men who get to say the truth. And everybody kind of goes, oh, that's just a poem, but it's the truth.
Well said.
Lucille, is there intention of bringing the work together with the efforts by First Nations people like Ohlone and presenting that as a kind of collaborative endeavor to expand mindfulness from their perspective as having cared for the land for so many hundreds of years, millennia? And,
yes, definitely. Yes, and as you know, I also co-edited an anthology called Red Indian Road West, Native American Poetry from California. And we had a reading last night at the San Francisco Public Library of some of the contributors to that book. And there's a lot of overlap between the Native American issues and the environmental issues. Yes. And in fact, I've been thinking of proposing a reading by the Native American contributors to Fire and Rain. And maybe there are some Native contributors in California, Fire and Water too, and we could do a joint event to present the indigenous perspective on the environment.
Yes.
What a beautiful idea.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
Yeah, I think, that sounds really good. There's a place, maybe once it opens back up, even the Oakland Museum might be interested in this. If it's people writing, or at least for the NorCal group, and there's got to be a place down in SoCal that would be open to this.
Oh. Yeah, we can find something. Probably, I know it's different for us because everybody's so spread out in Southern California. So if you do an event in LA, it's going to be mostly just LA people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think down here though we can find something. That's a fantastic idea. I can definitely organize something in the desert if anybody wants to come to the desert.
You're in the desert. That's native land.
It is. We're on Cahuilla land right here where I live in Palm Desert.
Go to the res. Talk to the elders.
Well, I'm very connected with the Native community in this area. In fact, there's a recent new college that's just been started here, the California Indian Nations Community College.
Wow.
I've actually worked with them. Long story, but I helped them connect with our community college here to offer classes through our college for their college. And I actually have some Native American students in my creative writing class this fall who are writing poetry from a Native American perspective. So yeah, I'm sure that for this area, I could definitely make some connections and find, some Native American poets. Not knowing them, I know them, but invite them to participate.
I'd be willing to reach out to San Quentin, which has a writing program. And I know that there are unfortunately too many Native people in the prisons, and see if we couldn't find somebody at San Quentin who would contribute as well. And maybe we could even get somebody from San Quentin to actually be part of the reading.
Yeah, sounds good.